Thanks for tuning in. This is Thomper Be Thompin', and in this video I'm going to show you guys all about this 2022 Honda CRF125FB, B for big wheel. I'm going to speak to why I chose this specific bike. I'm going to show you plenty of riding footage of me on it here on the trails. I'm going to go over some of the pros, some of the cons, and I'm going to run through a pretty substantial list of mods that I've done to it so far. So I do also have a KTM 300 XCW. That's what I like to ride when I'm challenging myself and getting better, and that's also what I race. But I was after basically like a pit bike, but I didn't want to get something so small as like a CRF 110 or a TTR 110, one of those kinds of bikes. Those are fun, not knocking those. I think they're great, they're highly sought after, but I wanted something that was just slightly bigger that I could also kind of cruise on the trails with for real. You could even take this thing out to a place like Hatfield and McCoy and go riding all day if you wanted to. So I wanted something that was kind of a pit bike, kind of a trail bike, and I wanted one of the air-cooled, just bulletproof options from Japan. And I specifically went with the Honda because it's fuel injected and it's got the electric start. The other Japanese offerings do not have fuel injection, and I'm not anti-carb or nothing like that. The fuel injection, it's reliable, it's bulletproof, there's no choke needed. It's just easy, it's nice. So just about any of the Japanese bikes are going to be bulletproof, reliable, these air-cooled trail bikes that they make. But aside from the fuel injection and the electric start that this one has, it also has this coat hanger on the side. Some people use it as a backup kickstart too. But with it being a Honda, Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, you're going to have plenty of OEM parts that are going to be pretty readily available. So I did for a minute consider getting one of the Chinese bikes that are about $1,000, similar in size and power, but I had experience with one of those before, and they may last a while, 3, 4, 5 years, but if you're riding them hard, they're not going to last very long at all. One of the biggest pros about this Honda 125 is that it is the smallest bike that you can get that actually has a clutch with a full manual transmission. It's only a 4-speed, more on that later, but this just makes it an extremely beginner-friendly bike for anybody who's learning how to ride clutch. So if you're buying this for your kid, for your family, for yourself, you can row through your own gears using the clutch, and that'll teach you how to modulate that and use the clutch to your advantage in a lot of spots. But it being so low to the ground, extremely beginner friendly. It has plenty of power to scoot around pretty good, but not enough power to really loop out on you. So super beginner friendly for learning how to drive with a clutch. A couple of the other pros are that it has a 1-gallon fuel tank, that's it, but it's incredibly fuel efficient. So that 1 gallon, I've heard of it, people getting 100 miles out of a single tank, 100 miles plus out of a single tank of gas on these. Also, oil changes are incredibly simple. I believe the manual says it's 0.9 quarts of oil, no oil filter to mess with. So those oil changes are incredibly easy. Also, the gas cap is a ratcheting gas cap, so you cannot over tighten it. There is also a keyed ignition. A lot of reviewers will comment on this. So that's great to have, especially if you've got kiddos and you don't want them riding the bike when you're not home. You can just take the key with you and they can't fire up the machine. It's also got a gas light, low fuel indicator up here on the dash. That light comes on at approximately 0.2 gallons. So that'll be what, 15 to 20, 25 miles of range left over. So this machine isn't perfect. I'm gonna run you through a quick list of cons. It's kind of heavy. The big wheel version is 199 pounds stock. Now for an adult, that's really not a problem at all, but you know, for a small kid, get it stuck in the mud, trying to pull this thing out, 200 pounds is not the lightest machine out there. The stock foot pegs are kind of a joke. There's some aftermarket solutions out there, but these are really small. Sure, they do the job, but there's better options. The next con, this kickstand is really short. I don't know why they didn't make it an inch longer. That would have helped a lot, but she leans over pretty far. So if you're on hilly terrain, decent risk of it falling over. I hesitate to even mention this con, but the aftermarket support is pretty good for these CRF125Fs, but it's not quite as good as the 110s. Those are more popular pit bikes, so there's a lot more companies making products for it, but that's kind of middle of the road. Pretty good, room for improvement. The next con I want to talk about are the tires. The stock tires are CSTs and they are perfectly adequate for regular trail riding and cruising. Riding around on a farm, a ranch, hitting the trails, it's no problem. But if you intend to push this thing pretty hard, for not a lot of money, you can significantly upgrade the tires. More on that later. This thing comes with a drum brake in the rear. I think the Yamaha and the Kawasaki have disc brakes in the rear. And drum brakes are simple to maintain. It does the job, it's stopping the machine, but you cannot replace like the touch and feel and the modulation of a disc brake in the rear. So kind of a missed opportunity. It's 2022. They should be selling these with a disc. The last con I want to talk about is that these only have a 4-speed transmission. The competition has a 5-speed. First gear on the Honda is you run out of it really quick, which is great for very slow technical riding, especially for a beginner. It'll allow you to not have to clutch so much to keep from stalling out. And second, third, and fourth gear are pretty linear and just very common sense gears. They make total sense. And it will get up to about 50 miles per hour, but yeah, the competition has 5 gears. I'd rather see 5 and a broader spread. So the first modification I'll talk about is tires. Again, these are some CSTs that come stock with the machine, and they're perfectly adequate for regular trail riding. However, I went out and got these Tusk EMEX T-35s. They're Rocky Mountain's internal brand, and these are for the soft intermediate terrain. So they've got that soft intermediate terrain compound, and you can just kind of tell there's a massive difference. They're technically the same size on paper. However, these Tusk tires are a little bit taller when they're fully mounted. And you really notice the difference in the front. The tread depth in the front is just completely different. I also put on the Tusk brand severe duty tubes just to avoid getting any pinch flats. So these aftermarket tires are going to be much better performing, but the stock ones do okay. The next modification I made was an upgrade to the skid plate. The stock skid plate is stamped steel, I'm pretty sure, and it's actually decently substantial, but it's not nearly as wide as this aftermarket one. This is by Ricochet Off-Road. It's aluminum, welded. You got full coverage in the bottom, all the way through to your swing arm bolt. This plastic piece here is meant to protect your lower linkage. So this I got from Tusk. I got from Rocky Mountain. It's a Tusk brand lower linkage guard. It's a universal fit. So you just cut it, drill into your stock or your metal skid plate here, and it mounts right up there. What the stock skid plate up front does not provide is this winged protection out here for your clutch and your transmission. So you get a much wider coverage with this Ricochet off-road skid plate. I'm 6 foot tall, 190 pounds, and I plan on bashing this thing pretty good. So as I said earlier, the stock foot pegs are really, really small, and the teeth are not sharp at all. So if you plan on riding aggressively, that's something to consider. There are many aftermarket options that are a lot wider with sharper teeth. So I got a set. They're just on back order, so I'm waiting for those to show up. I do still have the stock suspension in here. I did order a set of front springs and a rear spring from BBR, and that's going to make it about 30% stiffer. I don't know if it's going to raise up the height at all, but it'll at least make it a little bit stiffer for an adult riding the machine. Stock suspension, though, isn't too shabby after just cruising around the yard. The next big upgrade I did was this BBR seat. All it is about an inch taller seat, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it really does open up the cockpit and open up that rider triangle quite a bit. So if you're a taller adult and you're wanting to ride around on this thing, that taller seat's pretty nice to have. So these bikes do come with this top side, just cheap plastic chain guide. A lot of folks say that they have issues with it rubbing on the chain. I have not witnessed that problem yet, so I've left mine there. But stock, it comes with a tiny little plastic protrusion. I'm not even going to call it a chain guide because it doesn't wrap around the chain. So I went with this piece from BBR that is a proper chain guide. However, be aware that if this takes a big hit, it's not fully connected to the other side of the swing arm. So if you have a big impact from the side, there's a chance that this tab up here where it mounts can bend on you. This isn't all that interesting, but I did put on a Tusk tack/hour meter, so that lets me check my idle speed, my total hours on the bike, and that just wraps around the spark plug. That's pretty common for any one of these machines. Also, I mounted up these little tie-down tabs to the front forks. Just nice to have. One of the other big upgrades I made to this machine was these handlebars. So these are aluminum handlebars from Rocky Mountain's brand called Tusk, and they are for the CRF110s and the Yamahas and their 110s and 125s. So it's kind of like one of those pit bike bars. So it does bring the height of the bars up just a little bit, again opening up that cockpit and that rider triangle. But they're also approximately an inch to an inch and a half wider overall over the stock bars. The stock bars were fine, but I just like a nice wide set of standard length bars. So on these bars, I put on the Acerbis wraparound handguards. I've had good luck with these. I use these on my KTM, and they've held up pretty well. These plastic pieces fall off though quite a bit, so I just usually zip tie those back on. I went with the ODI Rogue grips, the version 2. Got some donuts on here. If you know, you know. Those will save your thumbs from getting too beat up. I'm sticking with the stock levers so far because these wraparound handguards protect them so well, but it gets pretty busy up here. These handlebars from Tusk, they come with this extra support which mounts here to give it a little bit more rigidity in case you fall, and the Acerbis handguards mounted right up above those. Plus I have a light system I'll talk about next on here, so it gets pretty busy pretty quick. It also makes reaching my keyed ignition a little bit tougher, but that's not too bad. All right, so it's daytime, so it's going to be a little bit tough to see, but I did mount a small 15-watt LED light bar on this thing, just for some nighttime trail cruising. Also, if we ever go to a place like Hatfield and McCoy's, it's just nice to have a headlight. It makes you that much more visible. So I mounted that up. It was kind of a hodgepodge, sort of a Frankenstein setup from various components off of Amazon. I'll try to link those below if I can remember to, but everything's just wired up through to the battery. So this is a waterproof switch with, again, a 15-watt light bar. Throws out plenty of light for regular trail riding. And I've got these special little mounts that I bought separate from Amazon. So those just slip around the handlebars and everything secures down nice and tight. It is adjustable up and down. But again, just wired straight into the battery. It's a very low draw, so the stator on this bike can handle it without any problem at all. One quick comment I forgot to mention on these ODI Rogue 2 grips is that these are standard length grips. So the stock throttle tube on these CRF125Fs is like a shorter version. So these are lock-on grips, which I just prefer. They're so much easier. So I had to buy the special throttle cam from ODI. It's their Cam R as in Romeo that fits for these CRF125Fs. It gives you the same exact throttle response and feel as the stock version, but if you just want to do some glue-on grips, there are many different options for throttle tubes out there to get you that standard size throttle tube. So that's a pretty quick and simple fix. All the shift levers are pretty much back ordered right now. So the stock one does not have a folding tip. So in the event of a crash, this soft steel will bend. I did have a CRF125F, and my shifter and brake lever were bending all the time on that thing. This stuff is really soft. So the brake lever I think I'm kind of stuck with because I haven't seen any aftermarket options, but there are a few options for the shifter with an actual folding tip. So I'm waiting for those to come back in order, and I'll pick up one of those. I have not been able to find any aftermarket complete wheel sets for this machine yet. So I'm going to be sticking with the stock sort of like chrome finished ones. They do make some black rims out there, but you'll have to spoke them up and everything, and I just don't feel like doing that at all. So I'll be sticking with the stock rims. There are some aftermarket exhaust options out there too. You can get a couple slip-ons, and they actually have some full-length header back exhaust systems out there too that you can buy. They're all pretty nice sounding, but I'm just gonna stick with stock because even though it doesn't look nearly as cool, I just really prefer having the very quiet machine just based on where I ride. So in this clip, I just want to give you guys an idea of what a full-size adult looks like on one of these big wheels. So the bike is 100% stock. I am 6 foot tall, 190 pounds, and I wear a size 12 boot. So I'm just going to do some riding around, sitting and standing, and I'll speak to some of the features a little bit really quick. The only thing I've done is I rolled the bars forward a little bit because they had them tucked down pretty low, but you may see online that you cannot start this bike in gear. I've got it in first gear and you can start it. You just got to pull in the clutch. It has a little sensor. One of the other things I love is how quiet this sucker is. So I'm just going to ride around in first and second gear. Actually, I'm going to take off in second and do some sitting and standing riding. Move back on the seat a little bit. So I'm sitting pretty far back, tucked up for a corner. Oh yeah, look at that, look at that. All right, now I'll do some standing. It's kind of hard to shift with a size 12 foot boot on, but it is very doable. Like the gap between the foot peg, the stock foot peg anyways, and the shifter isn't too big. I can do these shifts standing up with relative ease and a size 12 on. So in conclusion here, I'm really in love with this little play bike. You can use it as a pit bike, use it as a little trail machine. The whole family can ride it. You can do a little bit of hard enduro, a little bit of motocross on it. Yeah, you can just have a ball. So really happy with it. I do wish it had a 5-speed transmission. Some of these hills out here, I had to climb in first gear only. I had no choice, but not a deal breaker. Thanks for watching.